So what I'm going to do now is start drawing the presentation border that we will need for our projects. You'll need this presentation border so that you can present your plans, your site plan, your floor plan, your elevations, and your section. We're going to be using a sheet of paper that is 17 inches by 11 inches. And let me go ahead and begin. So I'll come over here. I'll start a new file. It is going to be based on the AutoCAD template. From here, I'll go ahead and set up my units like I've done before. All of you should know very well how to do this. You didn't hear me explain anything because I'm assuming that you understand it all, but take a look. Make sure that's what you have on your screen, and I'll go ahead and click OK. Then I'm going to do a save as. So save as, it's going into my folder here, and it's going to be my first initial last name. And this one's going to be X border because it will be externally referenced into multiple drawings. So I'm going to go ahead and click save now. Personal preference, I am turning off my grid. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. What I'm going to draw should go onto a specific layer. From my layer properties manager, I click on new. And this is going to be my architectural border. So a border. The color can stay white. And then I'll enter. Double click the icon here on the status to make it my current layer. Move away from my layer properties manager. And now I can begin to draw. 17 by 11 is going to be the sheet layout. So real quick here, I'm going to draw some lines and I'll start at 0, 0. I clicked on the line icon, 0, 0, enter. I'm going to turn ortho on. I'm going to draw this line 17 inches to my right. I zoomed out a little too far. So now I'm going to zoom in a bit. Move in this direction, 11 inches up. Over this way, 17, enter. And then I'm going to type C for close. I'm going to take a look at my measurements. And this represents the size of the sheet, tabloid size, 11 by 17. I drew this because I want to know very well what my limits are going to be, and I need to operate within these limits. I'll tap the escape key. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to offset to take the margins into consideration. I'm going to offset by 1/4 of an inch on all 4 sides. I'm going to type O for offset. And I'm going to type a distance of 0.25 inches, or you can also type it like this, 1/4, and that would be 1/4 inch. Either way is going to be fine. I'll leave it at 1/4 inch there and enter. And then I'm going to select the lines one at a time, and I'll offset them to the inside. And then enter. I'll go back to my quick measure tool. And now you can see that my dimensions now with those margins included are 1 foot 4.5 inches by 10.5. And then you can also see the overall dimension there of that sheet, which is 1 foot 5 inches, 17 inches by 11. But this is how I process the information. I'll tap the escape key now. And then I really don't need these outer lines. So I'm going to take all 4 of those. Just select them like that and then tap the delete key. And they're gone. And now I can tell myself to stay within these parameters here. Don't go outside of them. Otherwise, I'm getting into that 1/4 inch of a margin. I also want you to note that I started at 0, 0, but I'm no longer at 0, 0. And there's nothing wrong with that. With that being done, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fillet my corners. So I'm going to type F and enter. My radius is already set to 0, and I want to make sure that I use the multiple option. So I'm going to type M and enter. And I'll fill it with the lines. I'll just go all around. Like that, and enter. The next thing I want to do is make this border stand out, but not too much. What we've done in the past is we assign colors to the layers, and then those colors print to a line thickness. But another way of achieving line thickness is by using a polyline. And that's what I want to introduce right here, is how to make polylines. So real quick, let me just talk for a moment about polylines. If I click over here in my home tab, draw panel, polyline. Let me just do this over here on the side. I can draw polylines, and I can begin here and just simply draw, come over here, and then I'll type C for close. So C and enter. If I hover over this polyline, you'll see how everything is highlighted. The difference here is that the lines here that you see, they have been joined. Whereas the lines over here, they're still individual. And my goal is to have these become polylines, because then what I can do with polylines is I can select them like this. I can go into the properties and I can change what's called a global width. Just to exaggerate it a bit, I'm going to type in a global width of 1 inch and enter. And look at what happens. Let me hit the escape key. If you notice, this is almost like the hatch command where I fill it in solid, but it's not. It's a polyline. And I can only do this with polylines. I can give thicknesses. I cannot do it to lines. The border over here, I really want it to have that line thickness. So I have to convert it to a polyline. And then with the polylines, I'm able to modify some of these endpoints. From here, I can grip this and move it over. I can take this grip right here and stretch it down. But I digress. Let me tap the escape key, and I want to apply a thickness to my lines. Let me go ahead and take this polyline, select it, and delete. And then I'm going to type Z enter, E enter, just to zoom into my border here, and then I'll zoom out a little bit. To make it a polyline, really simple and straightforward. You just have to join the lines. To do that, you can come over here to modify, and I believe it's one of these icons. One second. This one right here. You would click on join. So click on join, and you can simply select the lines like that and enter. And now when I hover over one of them, they're all highlighted. I showed you where to go for the icon to join, but I find it much easier to type J and enter. Just letting you know, keyboard shortcuts. So now that I've joined my lines, it now becomes one polyline. And now I can select that polyline, and I can go to the properties and change that global width. But I want to make sure that I go with a global width that is not going to be too thick here. I'll recommend you pick anything from 1/32 of an inch wide all the way up to, let's say, 1/8 of an inch. And so here's what I mean. If I change this global width to 1/32 of an inch and enter, you can look at that and you don't see too much of a difference. But if I zoom in, you'll see how it has that thickness. Now, if I select that polyline again, and this time change the properties, instead of a 32nd, make it 1/8 of an inch and enter. Now you can see how it gets thicker, right? You really won't know what this looks like until it prints. I always recommend that you do some test prints to make sure you have that thickness right, or you look at your architectural scale and take a look at a sheet of paper that is about the size of 11 by 17. Use the scale to check the thickness on the scale to see how thick of a line you'd like to make. I'm going to leave this entirely up to you. I also want to show you something else I could do here. Let me tap the escape key. For the border, it could be as simple and straightforward as the 4 lines, or you can embellish this a little bit. Let me show you how I would do that. So first of all, I'm going to select the border again, go to the properties and change that global width back to 1/32. And then what I'd like to do is offset that border to the inside. So I'm going to type O and enter. And I'd like to offset it 1/4 inch looks to be okay. So I'll keep that and I'll enter, and I'll take this line and I'll offset it in by 1/4 inch and then enter. And now I have, you could say, a double border. And if I wanted to, I can take this one and maybe go back to the properties and change that from a 32nd to 1/16 of an inch. A little thicker. So that's possible to do too. Let's say you want to do something a little different than that. Or you just simply want to start all over. Let me go ahead and take this line or this polyline and delete it. And what I'd like to do is start again. This time I just want a line along the top and the bottom. What I could do is I could trim. So I can type TR and enter, and I can trim this line segment here and then this one over here and enter. When you look at this, you might want to ask yourself, it's like, well, I could make it a line and then still give it a thickness, but no, you can't. This polyline here is unique. It only consists of one line segment. If I wanted to start with one single line segment from the very beginning, I could do that, and I'll show you a couple of ways. First of all, I could go straight to polyline, and I can draw a polyline. I'll just draw it over here on above for just a moment. And I'll start, let's say here. So let's say I draw one single polyline right there, 17 inches. And now I can click on it and then come over to the properties and change that global width. And this time I'll try a 1/16 of an inch. There we go. All right, so that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is I can click on line, right? And I can draw a line, and I'll make this one also 17 inches and then enter. And now if I try to change the properties, I'll select it, go to properties. There is no width because it's a line, not a polyline. So how do I make this a polyline? What I do is I type PE, and this is for polyline edit. And then, by the way, you can find that icon. Let me tap the escape key over here under modify, and polyline edit is right here. So I'll click on it. I'm prompted to select a polyline. I don't have a polyline. I simply have a line. So I'm going to click on the line. And then I'm prompted, do I want to turn it into one? The default is yes. So I enter. And from here, I can change the width. So I click on width and I specify the new width. And let's say I go 1/8 of an inch and enter. And then I'll enter again to terminate the command. That's how I can take a line and make a polyline out of it. Now, if I want to, I can change that width. And I've already shown you, I can select it, go to properties here, and then change the width there. The other way to do it is to type PE, enter, select it, and then click on width and override it here. I'll change it to, let's say, 1/4 inch, just so you can see it on screen. And then I'll enter. And then I'll enter again to terminate the command. Those are the different ways of generating these polylines. I'm just going to take these two and delete them. And then I'm going to come back over here, and I decide that I want to change my mind, and I do want to have those 2 lines back in there. Okay, so then I'm going to type L and enter. I'll draw the line from here to there, enter, and then I'll join it. So I'll type J and enter. I'll join this polyline with this line and this polyline, and then enter. And when I join it, you'll notice how it takes on that width. Now you might say to yourself, well, I could have also started with the polyline command, And I'll do it over here. I'll click on polyline and I'll go from this endpoint to this one and then enter. Well, sure, that works, but doesn't have the thickness. I could try and change the thickness. I can take that and change it over here to match. Let's say 1/16 of an inch. I could do that, but then look at the corners. They don't meet the way they should because they're not joined. I need to join them. I could type J for join. I could also go to my polyline edit command and type PE, enter. It says select the polyline. I'll pick this one. And right away, it detects that it is a polyline. What would you like to do with it? I'd like to join. So I click join and I'll join this one to it and then enter. And notice how it cleans up that corner. And then I'll enter again to terminate the command. Cleans up the corner up here. And then it also cleans up the corner down there. If you want, you can do something a little different here as well. And let me show you that for a moment. I'm going to take my polyline. I'm going to click on the icon and I'm going to draw a polyline from this point right here, this endpoint. Then I'm going to take it to the midpoint and then I'm going to take it to the endpoint. So I've drawn 2 segments to the polyline. I'll enter to terminate the command. And I know I have one polyline on top of another. So I'm glad that I have my groups turned on, or at least I'll double check. Let me come down here to customization. And I want to see if I have cycling through my groups on. And I'm looking, give me one moment. There it is. I have selection cycling checked. So that's good. And then I come down here to double check. And yes, it is on. So as soon as I click right here, it'll show me 2 polylines. So I want to pick this one or that one. And if I look really close at this, when I hover over the bottom one, it starts to highlight the other line segments. When I hover over this one, it's only highlighting that one polyline across the top. So this is the one that I want. So I click on it. Now what I'd like to do is take this endpoint, click on it, and bring it down. And I'm going to say, oh, a good, let's see, I have ortho on. Yes. So let me bring that down for now, 1/4 of an inch. And that did not do it. Oh, it looks like it changed something over here. It moved it. My apologies. Let me undo that. Okay. Let me select it again. And it still seems to be over there. Huh. Why is that one there? Give me 1 second. It shouldn't be there. Hang on a minute. Let me undo. And let's see. Okay. I had to undo. And I want to pick this polyline. I'd like to take this endpoint and bring it straight down. What ended up happening is the fact that I probably was a little too close to that line, and it may have snapped to that endpoint by mistake. So now I'm going to try it this way. I'm going to take my cursor straight down this way and see if this will work. And it's giving me that distance of 8 inches or so. But I'm trying to stretch this down just by 1/4 of an inch. And I don't know if it's working, and it's not working. All right, I'm going to try something different here. Undo that. Okay. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a guide here. I'm going to draw a line from this endpoint down 1/4 of an inch, just like that. And now I have a line there. I'll click over here. It does pick the polyline that I want. I'm going to grip it and let it snap to this endpoint right there. Ha. And it actually moved everything at once. Okay, give me 1 second because that's not what I wanted to happen. So thank you for being patient here with me. I just want to pick one of the polylines. So I select the polyline. And now that I have the line there, I'm going to click it here to stretch it down to this endpoint. That's what I wanted to have. Now I can take this line and delete it. So the reason for showing this to you is because I can take this polyline and I'm going to type PE, enter. I'm going to select it and I'm going to turn it into a spline. And now I'm going to change the width on it. And that width is going to be 1/16 of an inch. And then I'm going to enter to terminate the command. It gives it a bit of a curved shape there, as you can see, because I've converted it to a spline. So if you wanted to do something like that, you could. It's up to you. I'm just trying to show you some examples of what's possible. And now I can take this and bring it down a little bit more. Let's say by 1/2 inch. Let's see if that'll work. Yeah. Right. So you can do all sorts of things. The goal here, though, is to not let the border overwhelm what you're going to show inside of the border. While I am testing out some different things here, I am being very mindful of the fact that maybe that line, that polyline might be too thick, might be too thin. I won't know until I print it out, either as a PDF or an actual printed sheet. And then I can come back and make some modifications. Let me take this line and delete it, and then zoom extents. The next thing I'd like to do is add a title to my project because it'll be helpful. And by the way, whatever title you put on here, it's going to appear on all of your sheet. Pick any title that you'd like. You can come up with it. I'm simply going to show you how to put the text in, show you some options for the text, and then you can put in your title. For my text, what I'd like to do is, first of all, create my text style. I'll come over here to the Annotate tab, and from Annotate, I have a Text tab. I'm going to click on this arrow here to open up Text Style. In my AutoCAD drawing, I have two default styles. The first one is Annotative, the other one is Standard. I don't want to use either one, so I'm actually going to create a new style. And then once I do this, you'll see how it is possible, if you wanted to take this standard and change the font and go ahead and use that. But I stay away from that. I'm going to click on New, and my new style name, I'm going to simply call it Border Title. That way I know that's the style name. I'll click OK. And then I'd like to associate a font with that style. Pick from the list of fonts. And if you change it, for example, from Arial to, let's say, this one, it'll give you a preview of what that font looks like. And this one is okay to use because it's simple, it's straightforward. I am going to say to stay away from fonts that are difficult to read. So this one here might be difficult to read. And you don't want the text to take center stage. You want your drawing to do that. So the text that you pick, or rather the font that you select, you want it to be secondary to the drawing. Just like your border. You want your border to be a nice border, but it needs to be secondary to the drawing. So pick from any font that is easy to read. So here's this one. That is relatively easy to read. One to completely stay away from, for example, would be something like this. Very hard to read, a brush script. There's also another one like this one here. Very difficult to read, even though it looks simple. But we don't want to take away from the presentation of our border. We pick a font that is formal. So this one here, for example, not too bad. So look through your list of fonts, and the only way you're going to get the preview is by clicking on the font name and then taking a look at the style. I'm going to go with a font that I've used in the past. In my case, I'll go with something like this, Century Gothic, easy to read. And then for the size, I'm going to leave the height at 0, only because I want to be able to type in the height when I'm putting in my text. And leaving it at 0 is fine. Nothing's going to happen. For the effects, I don't change anything here, but if you're curious what happens there, you can click on upside down. That's what it looks like. You can click on backwards. That's the effect you get. For the width factor, right now it's set to 1. If I change that width factor, for example, to a 2, notice how it widens it. If I change that width factor to a 0.5, it condenses it. But I don't need to do anything there. I'll leave it at 1. And then this oblique angle, this has been around for many years. This predates the ability to use TrueType fonts in AutoCAD and use italics. So this was one way to make it look like it was italics. I could make it, let's say 15-degree oblique there. And this was also a way to do engineering drawings, because engineering lettering is typically at a slant like this. I don't want to change that angle, so I'll just leave that at 0. Also, if I can come back to this where it says size, this annotative, we'll talk about that later. For now, leave that unchecked. Pick any font that you'd like, and then go ahead and set it current. Yes, I want to save my changes, and then I can simply close because the apply button is already grayed out. So that means it's applied. So I'll click on close. The next thing I want to do is drop in my text. I'm already in the Annotate tab. From here, I go to the text panel, and then I click on this drop down where it says multi-line text. I have the option of using multi-line or single line. For this example, our border, it's simply going to be one line of text. So we're going to go with single line text, and then I can introduce multi-line text to you as well, just so you can see the difference. But for now, I'm going to start with single line text. So I click on that. As soon as I click on it, I'm indicated to specify a start point. And I'll click anywhere on the screen because I will position this and make some property changes later. For now, I simply want to get the text onto my drawing. So I'm going to click at this point. And then you notice that it's prompting me for the height. Wants to default to 3/16. And again, this is going to be a personal choice. I would say do not make it any smaller than 3/32 and perhaps no bigger than 1/4 inch. I'm going to set mine to 1/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to enter. And now I'm prompted for the rotation. 0 is a good default, so I'll enter. And now I can start typing in my title. And I'm going to use all caps. I'm simply going to type in project title. And then I'm going to enter once. It appears to drop me down to the next line, even though that's not the case. I mean, I could continue to type. And let me actually do that. I'll just do this for a moment, okay? Line 2, just to show you something in here. And then I'm going to enter. And then I'll enter again to terminate this single line text. And the reason I added that second line is because I want to come in here and show you. If I click on this text, notice it is separate from the line below. It never really brings it together. And that's fine. That's how single line text works. No problem. I'll take this line out now. So I'll highlight and delete. This is my project title. And I guess before I get into the details of this, let me switch gears for you a moment and show you what multi-line text looks like. So I'm going to click back up here in the Annotate tab, text panel, and I'm going to click multi-line text. And now when I do that, the prompt is a little different. It's asking me to specify the first corner. So I'll go ahead and do one click, and then I'll come over here and I need to specify the opposite corner, and I'll click right here. And then I'm prompted to start typing. So I'll go ahead and type in the same thing I did before, but look at the ribbon. It looks very different than it did before when I was doing my single line text. So here I'm going to do the same thing and put in my project title. You will change it to whatever you'd like to name your project. So there's project title. Now when I enter, this time I'm going to do the same thing, and I'll do line 2, and then I'll enter again. And then I can keep entering, and it keeps me in this window. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to backspace, and I'm going to leave it right there. And I'm simply going to click away from the text like this. And now it's in there. And if I click on line number 2, you'll notice that it actually highlights everything. And that's because it's set to multi-line text. And now if I want to, I can take this grip, the column width, and bring it over. And when I do that, you'll notice how it changes my text and makes it fit within that box, and the box size is changing. And then if I bring it in a little bit more, you see how it'll stack it. So that's multi-line text. Let me tap the escape key versus single line. Single line text, I just don't have those options. But again, because this is going to be my border, I don't need multi-line. I just wanted to show that to you. And by the way, to edit the text, if you have a typo in there, you simply double click it. So if I double click my text here, there you go. I can simply start typing. So let me just change this. I'll click over here and I'll just call it my project title, and then I'll click away from it. And then I'll enter to terminate the command. Over here to change that, I'll double click, and then I can start typing in here as well. But notice how the ribbon at the top has changed because this is multi-line text. It just behaves a little differently. So I'm also going to call this my project. And then I will, instead of entering, I will click away from the text, or I'll simply come up here and click on Close Text Editor. And then I can still come back in and change that width, or I can double click on the text and I can change the width from here. And then click off of it. All right, so that's multi-line. But again, we don't need it now. I just wanted to show that to you since we're talking about text. I'll take that and click on it and delete. For my title, where would I like to place it? I've got some choices here. I could center it on my sheet. I'm going to take the title. I'm going to select the text there, and then I'm going over to properties. From the properties, I can change the justification. So instead of being left justified, I can center justify it. And notice how the grip point changes. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Let me zoom in. Notice how it now has a grip point at the center, which is what I wanted. If I'd like to, I can change the height from here. So instead of 1/8 of an inch, I can try 1/4 of an inch. It's gotten to be twice as big, and I'm testing things out. I just want you to see where you can change properties and make modifications. Now that it's centered, I can go ahead and use those grips and select it from this grip. I'll give it one click, and then I'll turn ortho off. And I'd like to center it on my border. I'm simply going to hover over here until I find the midpoint, and then I'll click on the midpoint. And now I'd like to move it up a little bit. So I'll type M, enter. It was already selected. So I can just click right here, turn ortho back on, and move it up. Well, let's say a distance of 1/4 of an inch for me. So there we go. So I can do that. So that's me placing my title centered on the border. The other thing I can do is I can take that title, I'll select it, go back to my properties, and the justification from center, this time I'll change it to right. And now I have a grip over on the right side. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to select it from there, bring it over, and I'm going to place it in the corner. I'm a real stickler for being precise here. What I'm going to do is tap the escape key for just a moment and watch this. I'm going to tap the escape key again, type O for offset and enter. Distance, 1/4 of an inch is fine, enter. I'll take the polyline, offset it up here like that, enter. And now I'll take my text, pick it, and let it snap to that endpoint. And the reason I offset 1/4 of an inch is because I want it to be equal on the bottom and on the right side. And now I tap the escape key, pick my polyline, and delete it. I simply needed it as a guide. That's how I can get my project title there. And then I'll show you one other thing, actually 2 more things. What if I want my project title to run along the side of my border here? Well, all I have to do is select it, and then I can go back to the properties and change the rotation from 0 to 90, and then simply place it where I'd like to have it. And we'll see if this works out, because I still have to put more information on the sheet. It's easy to try different things here. The nice thing is that you'll be externally referencing the border. So if you need to change it, you can always come back, change it, and it will update. So I can do that. Let me undo. There we go. And then I'll do one more thing here. I'll take that title again, and change the properties on it. And I think I want to bring it down to, let's try, for me, 3/16 of an inch, a little smaller. I'm going to change the justification, and I'm going to set it to middle center. And notice how it places the grip right there in the middle. But as I look at that, I realize, well, I think I want to bring it down. So instead of middle center, I'm going to change that to bottom center. So look at all the different justification options you have there. So bottom center. And now I'm going to take it from that bottom center. I'm going to bring it over, turn ortho off, and I'm going to place it along the midpoint. I need to find the midpoint. And I have nearest going, so give me 1 second. I'm going to come down here to my object snaps, and I want to turn off nearest, and then click away from that. And now let's see if it'll find the midpoint. Much better, much quicker, much easier. So right there. So now what I'm going to do is draw myself a line from that midpoint up, turn ortho on, enter, and then I'm going to offset. But how far? Let me do a quick distance check. So I'm going to type DI, enter, from this endpoint over, and I can see that I want to offset the line so that it's beyond the text. If I round this here, it looks like 1.25 inches should do the trick. O for offset, enter, distance 1.25 inches for me. Offset the line to the right, offset it to the left, enter. And now I'm going to trim my border. I'll show you trim, and then I'll show you another trick here too. So let me take this line and delete it. And then I'll type TR, enter, and trim the segment between the two lines. So that works. And then I can enter. And now I can take my project title, and if I'd like to, now I can bring it down a little bit more by, let's say, 1/16 of an inch. So 1/16 of an inch. There we go. Sits in between. That was trim, but let me undo. Let me show you another trick here. There's something called a break command, and I believe it's under the Home tab, Modify panel. And you have this choice here where it says break, and you can break between 2 points, and then you also have break at point. I'm going to give this one a try. Break the object between 2 points. So I click on that. I'm prompted to select the object, which is this polyline. And now I'm prompted to specify second point or start over, and let me pick the first point. So I'm going to type F and enter. And I'd like this to be my first point, the end point here. And then I'd like this to be my second point. And that's how I can break it. Similar to trim, just another way of doing things. Take the two lines, delete them, and then that's probably where I want to keep my title. But if I want to change my mind later, I'll be able to, because this is my presentation border. I'll make sure to save my drawing, Control S. And then, like I said, if I need to make changes, I can do so later. For now, as long as you have a border and you're using the polylines so that you can give it a width, you're good. And then put in the text and give your project any name that you would like to use.